have a quorum, so I'd like to call the meeting to order of the HHR Building Committee. This is our second full meeting doing business, so welcome everybody. Randy Giraldo's joining us. He's joined on the phone a few times, but he's here with us in person.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
Yep. And we'll get to Randy and Jeremy and Mike in a little bit and talk about permitting and approvals, et cetera. But initially, let's just do some housekeeping. The first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from the last meeting, from the March 3rd meeting. Does anybody have any comment or issues or discussion points on the meeting minutes from last week?
No.
If not, could we get a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to
Dave
approve.
Martin has motioned to approve. Can I get a second? Jamison and David have seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So
Aye.
the meeting minutes from last week are approved. We have an agenda item for public comment. If there's anybody who would like to make public comment, now is your chance. If you do, just introduce yourself. I'm not sure we've met. I'm Chris.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Cahill. I'm the Holmes PTO co-chair. And
Oh, great. Hey,
the
how are you?
Holmes
Nice to
Airport.
have you here.
Thanks.
In terms of the chair report, mostly over the course of this past week has been following up on the things we talked about at the last meeting. A lot of work was done by the Architects Rfp group, looking at the draft Architects Rfp that Mike Lynch and Kate Bush had put together. We can talk about that in a little bit, but I think that is very close to ready to go out to the architecture community, so we can get that process started and underway. We'll talk about it in a second. David Martin put together a really, really helpful breakdown of the funding approval process and the timelines that we can talk about in a little bit. But there was mostly over the past week, it's been following up on the things we talked about once we got the team leaders organized for each of the different tasks and work streams. People sort of set out to work on those topics. And we'll talk about kind of a number of those particular items over the course of the agenda. So nothing really otherwise material to report as part of the chair's report. We have with us this evening Jeremy Ginsberg, who's the director of land use, and then we have the chief building official, Mike Vitti, and then, as I noted, Randy Giraldo, who was on is on the Oxbridge committee. I guess it still is ongoing.
Yes.
And Randy has volunteered for our committee, be the team leader on the various approvals, inspections, approvals, et cetera, and liaising with Jeremy and Mike. And I thought it would be helpful for the committee, because again, I keep going back to this, a number of members on the committee, and I think some of the ex officios, this is the first time through a project like this, so it would be very, very helpful for us to understand the scope of and the requirements for, and maybe even most importantly, the amount of time necessary to achieve the different reviews and approvals that we're going to need to pull this project off. So I'll leave it to the three of you guys as to how you want to coordinate presenting that, but we would love to hear from you all what we're facing. I mean, it doesn't, and when we think that's going to be kind of most active in the process, right? I've been saying to people that we're kind of looking at the world between now and June 30th, because that's when we have to have our state grant submissions in, and then the world after June 30th. And in that pre-June 30th world, one of the things, obviously there's going to be preliminary design done, where we're going to hopefully hire an architect, hopefully hire a CM. So I think there's going to be a number of things that are going to touch you guys, but that's why I want to turn it over to you, so we understand what's going to happen in this initial phase, then what we think is going to happen in the later phase.
Yeah, I mean, I have in preparation, a number of different questions and points to make. But I think jumping in, that might be, some that might even be too technical. Maybe it might make sense if you guys gave kind of like a overarching
Sure.
view of process, steps, or whatever, and then afterwards I can kind of pepper in some of the points that I had.
Perfect, thanks, Randy.
Yeah.
So I'll go first, and then Mike Beatty, Chief Building Official, will go next. I'm Jeremy Ginsberg, Director of Land Use. I work with the local land use boards, Planning and Zoning Commission, Environmental Protection Commission, Architecture Review Board, Zoning Board of Appeals. And so, Chris and Randy are correct. Really, that's the first step, if you will. One of the first steps is line up all your local approvals. Mike and his team over in the building department come once you get all the local approvals, you get your building permit, and then we toss it to him and his team to take it from there. So let's back up to where you are now and what needs to be done for the schools. From what I understand, you're working on updated surveys, 2022 surveys of each of the 3 properties to understand existing conditions. What structures are out there? What's the topography like? Are there any inland wetlands or any other features we need to keep an eye out for? Where is the parking existing? Where are the driveways existing? How does it all lay out currently? That will be a tool for the architects. That will be a tool for the construction people as they try to imagine themselves working on a site while you're trying to keep these sites running, kind of what we've done at Ox Ridge, which is how do we try to do the best as possible, keep all the construction people at one end, keep the schools running, get the buses going, safe pedestrian access. How do we manage that? For better or worse, there's only summer vacation and winter break, and then there's a few days here and there. It's just not everything's going to be able to be done during those breaks. I leave it up to those. I think for some of the larger projects, you're able to adjust school schedules. That gets very complex. And it may be too complex, you might just say, whatever, run it through.
Can I stop you just for one
Sure.
second? You mentioned the surveys. Mike, we talked about that last week. Have we talked to the surveyor about updating surveys?
I have not, but I'm more than happy for.
I know we have the preliminary, the $102,000 appropriation that still has to happen. So are we waiting, I guess, from a process standpoint, before we can get surveyors started, do we need to get the approval of that initial appropriation?
I think, from what I understand from Kate, that money might already be there, and if it's there, you guys, your team can start pulling the trigger on, let me give you the heads up, surveyors these days.
Lead time, that's why I asked.
Technically, the committee needs to vote on it.
Yeah.
The Board of Selectmen's gonna vote on it Monday, and the Board of Finance is gonna vote on it Tuesday.
Right.
So I'm expecting that by Tuesday night, everything will be
Okay.
through. I can't envision a problem whatsoever. but-
I think we can contact surveyors now.
Yeah, but I've seen, it would make, and I think from last meeting, you were the right person to do that, because you know those guys and have the relationship with the surveyor.
Readiness needed.
Yeah, ready for me to get it, yeah.
So let's at least get them teed up and aware that we're gonna want them to get going, and we'll have money for them Tuesday.
So really those surveys are a tool for everybody, your team, the architect, the contractor. How much room do we have to work with? What can be done? As you develop the plans, ideas, sketches, concepts, they're gonna come to you with a couple different ideas. What will drive what land use boards you go to are the questions of, is what you're drawing up complying with the zoning regulations? If it does, you don't need the zoning board of appeals. It means everything complies. The second is, are you working near any inland wetlands? Henley, Holmes, probably not, maybe, but again, I'd have to take a look. Maybe you can avoid that, if possible, hopefully.
Is that a separate board then?
As a separate board, that would be the Environmental Protection Commission. You're definitely gonna be visiting with the Architecture Review Board. In this case, you're adding on to schools. You're not building all new schools like we did at the high school or Ox Ridge. So that should go, hope, a little smoother, because you're probably, my guess is you're gonna probably try to match what's there. It would look very awkward if you did strayed too much from.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the RFP, right?
Right.
Is to talk about the integrating into the existing structures and to harmonize with the existing structure.
And I think-
So, yeah.
I think that's to me, that would be the obvious choice. Planning and zoning is gonna look at traffic, parking, during, which was a big thing with Oxbridge, how do we do it during the construction, year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is, and forevermore. How do we make that work? How much parking do we need at each of these schools? Dr. Hadley was a big help for recently, like, hey, here's what we have in current staff, here's what we have in terms of future staff, administrative, et cetera. What do we need going forward? And what your group is going to, I'm sure, think of is, okay, we're doing our project. Where are there flexibilities down the road? We don't want to box ourselves in. You want to kind of design it such that, okay, the next group in 5, 10, 20, 30, whatever, can say, oh yeah, this is the wing we're going to bounce off of, or this is the floor we're going to go over. And the reason for that is land in Darien is very valuable and very scarce. So we have to figure out, going forward, what can we do without trying to avoid that, if it's possible. You guys might say, this is the max we can do on this. Planning and zoning to look at it relative to drainage as well. Drainage is also a very big thing in Darien, you may have heard about through the past years. These are all in very tight neighborhoods, neighbors very close by, who are sensitive to, again, during construction, the time when you got a lot of open areas, a lot of people on the site, extra paved area, and then forevermore. So we'll have to, Mike and I will have to look at the plans, see what drainage systems are on there now, and where we can add on to those, how big they've been designed for.
Now, that all sounds like what you were describing planning and zoning doing, all sounds like it's very much front-end loaded as part of the preliminary design that the architects are gonna be doing.
It is unlikely P&Z's gonna get too far into, what is this classroom gonna be used for? Hey, that's not really their jurisdiction.
Right.
Or why is that classroom 20 by 20 instead of 20 by 22? That's not their jurisdiction. They're not gonna look at it as, I need an egress door here or there, that's Mike and the fire marshal. They'll get into the, I'll call it the big picture stuff, which is, can a bus make that turn? Is there enough parking? Where's the fire lane? Kind of, how does it lay out? How is, during construction, what's gonna work? You're gonna look at sediment and erosion controls. So when the guys are out there for 2 years with open ground and it rains or snows, where's the water gonna flow to?
So I guess basic question, will they be involved in the architect selection process when the architects are doing their preliminaries, or will they get involved once we've selected and retained an architect and the architect starts getting into the real nuts and bolts of its design and engineering?
I would say once the architect, because they're gonna come to you with sketches, and then you're gonna drill down a little more, refine. I think P&Z's gonna come at the, kind of near the end of that process, because the architect's gonna have to work with the engineer and the rest of his team. So that's kind of near the end of the drawing, if you will. Certainly, our group is glad to sit down with the architect and their team as they start drawing, to kind of give them the heads up. They always invariably have questions about, how does Darien deal with drainage? What are your specific requirements on this? And that's the dialogue we have all day, every day with architects in our office. In terms of, hey, I don't work in Darien all day, every day. Tell me what odd rules you might have about these things. Or what are you specifically looking for? And they'll have their traffic guy talk to us and things like that. So it's an interactive thing.
Yeah.
But they're gonna be doing lots of sketches and schematics and all that stuff for months and months before they get to us. So you won't see us maybe till late this year, 6 months from now, you think? So P&Z's gonna look at it from, as I said, site plan review. How does the site lay out? And what's called a mandatory referral. Mandatory referral is a requirement under the state statutes. The statute is 8-24, which requires that a local planning and zoning commission issue a report for substantial improvements to town property, or any time the town wants to buy or sell a property. So for example, the crazy example I always use is the first selectman comes in one day and says, I want to sell this building. Planning and zoning would probably say, that is not consistent with our town plan. We're going to issue a negative report. And the difference between a positive report and a negative report is the next step beyond that is the representative town meeting, your 100-member legislative body. That changes the threshold of their vote. If it's a negative vote, they need 3/4 or 2/3 to override it. If it's a positive vote, it's 50-50 with the RTM. And that has ramifications for your funding. I would expect that what you're drawing up will almost certainly get a positive vote, because to have schools that are sufficiently sized for their constituents is certainly consistent with the town plan. So I know Oxbridge, that was pretty straightforward, that would be a positive vote. The good news is that report has to be issued within like 35 days when you request it. So that'll be done at the same time as the site plan. And usually, of these various boards, planning and zoning usually goes last. So you'll probably start with the Architecture Review Board. If you have to go to the Environmental Protection Commission for wetlands, you'll do that kind of concurrently in the same month. So you're looking at about 2-3 months. And during that time, the architect's going to be moving, doing other things, other drawings, working with other boards and agencies. But that's kind of our process, is in 4 to 6 months from now, 4 to 8 months from now, you'll have this 1 to 3 month board review, while the architect's doing other things and your board is meeting, you'll be doing this.
That's some high-level questions for you.
Sure.
So, for everything you said, are we doing it 3 times?
Well, that's a good
Or-
question.
Or can there be any of it that's synchronized or done kind of where it's one process?
I think the referral report, you know, probably could be one report, but the site plans are all going to be different.
Yeah.
So the parking layout, the design,
I
the
mean,
drainage.
like environmental.
Yeah, the
Well, first of all, there'll be a
wetlands, probably
threshold
won't be
whether it's an
wetlands.
issue or not,
Yeah,
right?
it's
So that may
not
not be ARP, probably 3 times? Or maybe the
3 times
same
in one night.
meeting, yeah, 3 times in
If
one
the
night, one
architects
after
are
the
ready,
other.
it depends on
Right.
the architect's schedule, to be honest. They might have one school done a month before, I don't know.
Right,
Really,
okay.
with
Yeah,
that,
we're gonna, I think, try pretty hard to
Run
sync everything up.
Sync everything, yeah, but it's probably gonna be 3 distinct
Yeah.
approvals.
items on one agenda.
Yes.
So it could be that
Yeah.
the Planning and Zoning Commission says, hey, great, welcome, it's Tuesday, December 20th. We're here tonight, special meeting, we're gonna just run all the schools through the system.
Another question, kind of more to the open group. For state grant funding or for, let's see here. Or the appropriation from the town itself, none of what you just described is necessary in terms of approvals.
That's my belief from Kate.
Okay.
Isn't that what you said? 'Cause
So
you're-
those
there's no
things
way you
can
get that.
proceed absent any of these actual.
Yeah, and we'll confirm that with the state grant consultant, once we have that person on board.
Okay.
If you think back to Oxford, those things were not in place,
Right.
not completely done
Yeah.
by the time that they went to the RTM for the full funding, because the full funding had to be done by June in order to get
Yeah.
the submission for the grant.
Yeah.
And the full completion of the process wouldn't be done by then.
Yeah.
We should have some initial architectural renderings and updated cost estimates, so that we can, give the RTM the best estimate we can.
That's the key piece of it, is being able to come up with a pretty well thought out estimate for the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen and the RTM, right? And so we have to have, it's one of those things where we have to have enough information to come up with for the architects in particular, and the CMs to come up with a workable, a really, a pretty accurate, believable estimate.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
I'm hoping that, when we get through the charrette process, we'll get some ideas during that phase.
Mhm.
And then when we select the one, they will at least get their preliminary round of drawings done, and that should give us they should be able to give us a better cost estimate from those. Whether we'll get the second round of drawings, I don't know.
Right.
So scheduling all of this, I know in Oxford we had, O&G took over the Gantt chart or whatever you want to call it at some point to become kind of the master updater of it, but prior to that construction manager being put in place, how are we handling scheduling and sequencing of a lot of these kind of activities, call it from here to June? Or maybe calendar year 2022?
Yeah, I mean, that's an item we have on the agenda,
Okay.
actually, because that's one of our, you're 100% right, that's an
Yeah.
important thing to talk about and get organized. So,
Yeah,
okay,
we
yeah.
can. Yeah, we've got the, I think we've talked about a committee, or subcommittee
Okay.
to work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one note that I had here is some of the elements you described require like a comment period, right?
Yeah, certainly, there will be a little lead time when you say, here's the application.
Yeah.
And, whether that goes to a hearing with notice to neighbors, things like that. So there is usually.
Like a couple weeks or something?
Yeah, usually it's 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks, so they've
Depending
got to
on-
kind of build that into the
And again,
schedule.
Yeah, so you gotta work
we
backwards.
try to prioritize these types of projects amongst the day-to-day operations and the pending applications, but sometimes you gotta move things around.
Mhm.
And again, if there's gonna be a public hearing, we gotta give 3 weeks lead time for legal notices in the paper, et cetera. So certainly we'll work closely with the architects on, as they get closer and closer, is working with them on the scheduling as they get these various plans drawn up, or in the case of the Architecture Review Board, some elevations, really, which is gonna drive that aspect. And it's all interrelated, is once you have to figure out how big so it's,
What about for issues like contaminants, call them?
that's where Michael
So
comes
is
in.
I was
that-
gonna say,
health
yeah, when does this
department?
get to Mike?
It's gonna be health, it's gonna be, you done?
I'm done.
I'm doing Oxridge with, me and Bobby Bush are the lead inspectors right now. So, with that being said, Oxridge, they pretty much, set things up ahead of time, so there's no surprises, which is what same thing we're gonna have to do, but since we don't have plans right now, but we probably do a review before construction, because if we're gonna do the additions and while school's open, we need to worry about egresses, fire protection, how are we gonna keep, so they're not cohabitating between the workers and the children, so there's a whole thing me and Bobby will go through in the fire marshal's office to keep everything separated. And whatever surprises we can try to figure out now, Eversource, so you're gonna have to upgrade the electric. Just one mechanicals. We're talking about today, maybe over the summer, doing the asbestos surveys, environmental surveys, so you know so there's no surprises
Right.
when you get into it.
Mike,
So
Mike, do we need to wait until then? Because I thought we had been talking about
We
doing
can do
the asbestos
hazardous
and PCB testing.
surveys earlier. We have basic surveys on, the asbestos. They've been doing them here since the 1980s when the federal legislation went into effect. So we're due this July for our triennial reinspection anyway. But to hire him now to come in and do an in-depth, where they're gonna actually do some destructive testing, break a hole in the wall and look at piping and stuff.
Yeah.
We can do that during the break period and during the summer. So when it comes time to start going to the building official, you got real information to give them. We're not guessing and estimating.
So when can we ask you to do that?
Because I think that was part of your preliminary
As soon as you tell me
appropriation.
to do it, I can do it. He did, the guy did Oxbridge in December and April
Okay.
of 2020. And ground was broken in
That was part of
It
your
was December
initial
2019.
appropriation, right?
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
So we can do
that's
it
part,
soon.
that's part of the initial appropriation that we're doing
Yes.
the Board of Finance for next week. So, as of next week, might as well go ahead and ask them to get it scheduled.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, we went through, why don't we just refresh on, I know from the last meeting, we talked about what those upfront, I think it was environmental asbestos, it was surveys,
The charrettes for the three
Well, no, I'm saying in terms of, yes,
Yeah.
I know it's in
Yeah.
the appropriation, but I'm saying in terms of things that should be on Mike's
Yeah,
now list. So we talked about the land surveys, we talked about environmental asbestos PCBs. It's probably too early at this point for things like, I mean, some of this is gonna come out of the survey, right? Like anything that's subterranean, anything, any call before you dig type stuff.
Mhm.
Geotechnical,
Yeah, that's
probably
what I
still
asked.
too early.
Boring's too early?
It's in the appropriation dollar amount that I gave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
includes the borings.
But you're gonna wanna know where to dig, and architect may come up with a configuration that puts it
Right.
slightly differently, and.
Yeah, you kind of wait for that. The
You wanna
architect
know
comes up
exactly
with
where it's gonna
something.
be.
Mechanicals and HVAC were the other thing I had that I thought we were gonna talk about, whether that was a now or a
Well,
little bit
that's,
later.
it's, the HVAC, the MEP work is gonna be part of the design
Right,
that will be going, like, when the architect's doing their designs, like, with the projects that I've done, we've gone to the state, smaller projects, I get them signed off by the building department, the board of health, the 504,
Right.
the handicapped person, and the fire marshal's office. Before, I have to do that before I get my permit from the state to do the work.
right.
So, you want the survey now, and like Randy said, once the architect agrees this is the general area we're gonna build in, he'll give us a drawing.
Right.
I want my borings done here, 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 here.
But the survey should show, presumably, certainly it'll show easements and subterranean utilities and things like that. if
Yes, they
anything's
will.
on
They'll
record.
show you existing and abandoned
Right.
if they have those records.
And then the hazmat study, we can tee that up now, and then do you think we should tee up soils and geotechnical now, or wait?
And wait.
Wait,
Yeah.
okay.
Just until you get through the charrette phase and you start to get greater certainty on where
Where things are
exactly
gonna
things
be,
are gonna
right,
be, yeah.
okay. So then it's two things really, Mike,
Yeah.
so updated surveys and hazmat asbestos PCBs. Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No,
off.
that's okay, I'm just, you're hitting everything. Basically, it's a little early for me, but, you're gonna, as they were doing Ox Ridge, you're gonna have third-party inspections. So your job's going pretty well there. We're moving along at a pretty good clip. IP's doing a great job up there. But like I said, it's a little early for me right now, without seeing what's in front of me, where you're gonna go with the addition.
But you'll comment on plans presumably.
Oh, yeah, we'll definitely do a plan review. We do all that in-house. We'll get a third party to look at it also. And then, but that's basically right now, without seeing a plan, I can't tell you where we're gonna have problem with traffic, where we're gonna have problem with egress. I mean, keeping the job separate from, any bystanders, so it's hard right now.
Yeah, no, I think the purpose of this was more to try for the whole group to understand kind of who, one, to meet you guys, right, and put faces with names, and two, to understand sort of who's responsible for what as we get into this
Like the
process.
Oxford problem, they had to put a wheelchair ramp in over the summer, get all that ready for school this year. Then that's, now May, they want to move everybody over, which I don't know. Might have to do that, school closes, move everybody over, and that building's coming down. And then everything's gotta get moved over, get repaved.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a lot of coordination, so any surprises you can find now, while you're on your downtime is the best time to do it.
Right.
Not when we're in the middle of construction, next thing you know, you find asbestos, you're finding this, and next thing you know, it's like, okay,
Yeah,
and the project's going
the
along.
fewer surprises, the better.
Got a question on
Yes.
traffic. So it seems like certain contracts, and maybe there's a cost amount, but certain things we can do without RFPing and competitive bid, and then certain things merit it. Is there a cost threshold or something? Because I'm wondering on traffic, whether it has to be an RFP or not.
Need a traffic study?
The traffic study, yeah. So it's not a huge contract, but it's kind of a tweener where it's maybe, I know we competitively shopped it for Oxford. We went to two groups.
Was it 15?
Ended up being more like 35-ish, so
Yeah,
I
what's
could go
the
either way.
differentiator to say they have to do an RFP or not?
I don't know. Yeah,
Professional
that's the
services
question.
don't require an RFP.
I think,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
Kate would be able to answer that question.
Okay.
It's a pretty routine question for her, so you're right.
It's fine either way.
Professional services, there's not a lot of traffic people out there.
Yeah.
official,
Right, so
probably 2 or
the-
3 in the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, because there are certain consultants that, you know, we can retain without an RFP. We can
Right.
solicit proposals from selected, if there's only 2 or 3 of them,
Yeah, they'll both
Right.
bid on it.
they'll bid on it, we'll review and make a recommendation.
What have you done historically? Do you usually bid it out, or do you just hire?
No, we did, like what we did at Ox Ridge, we solicited the firms, you know, the well-known firms.
Yeah,
and-
Okay.
and got
Yeah, we
prices.
went to 2.
yeah.
Well, do we know
We
who?
did one in Langen and,
Tie and Bond.
yeah.
So we know who they are, right?
Yeah.
Is it too early to solicit those proposals? Do we need to get at least preliminary drawings first so they know what they're looking at?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of this, what will really drive the traffic study is how many new classrooms are you building, et cetera, how
It's
many
the
new-
enrollment projections
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
So,
Well, and we need to know land use approvals and stuff, so, because if that changes where we have to build the building, it's gonna change the traffic pattern.
change the
potentially,
driveway, et
so-
cetera, so.
And there's been talk, you know, then I think there's also part of the design process is gonna be in what schools might we need another second entrance and exit, or can we expand parking, not expand it, right?
And the scope of work for traffic, I found, can vary significantly depending on, you know, whether it's a state road or not, whether it's there's an existing traffic signal or not. And it gets into actually a schedule implications, because you need second, you know, kind of state level approvals under
Mhm.
certain circumstances. Given where these schools are, I'm guessing we're gonna be hitting those on the streets that they're
Well,
located.
there's certainly at Hinley, because
Yeah.
of the post road.
Right, and you have
And then
106
also-
over at Holmes, Mansfield's the same,
Yeah,
and
they're all
Oxford
state
Ridge,
roads.
that's a
They're
state
all state
road,
roads.
so I think they're all gonna be pretty high touch.
I guess the post road will only come into factor if somebody wants to cut an entry right
Yeah,
off.
which I read something
Which we
about it
do.
here.
Yeah, that's one of the things that
Yeah,
was
for Hinley.
That'll be
suggested as a,
significant.
let's have another way in and
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And 106 is a state road as well?
Mhm.
Yeah, 106 and 124 state roads.
All right.
Just last quick question, is asphalt paving, because a big thing is drainage, and the town's drainage, if you add any 1,000 square feet of impervious, you have to retain it on site. If it's a parking lot now, and then, which, is parking lot deemed impervious right now from a,
There is, parking lot would be considered impervious when you take your coffee at the end of the day and you dump it on the
Okay.
bin. However, there's a new technology, pervious. So the most noticeable installation of that is the Rome Presbyterian Church. That was done with pervious pavement. So next time it rains, go down to the Rome Presbyterian Church and you'll see very clearly, there's areas that water is infiltrating when it's raining and areas where it's not. So it's a very obvious thing. And if you go out there even today, you'll see areas where, in the parking lot where there's still snow, and where the snow is all melted, because it just dropped right through. That might be something to consider, but you'd have to talk to the gentleman behind me, who would be responsible for maintaining it going forward, and you have to look at that long-range cost.
Well, I was gonna say, water gets in there, freezes and expands.
Yeah,
and-
again, you have to buy.
I was more-
There's pros and cons,
Yeah.
but,
I was more asking in that it's a very expensive system that's getting put in at Oxford, and it's because we've created a lot more impervious area. But in this instance, based on these schematics, it looks like we're not actually netting, first of all, we're not netting a ton of new inhabitable square footage. I don't even think we're gonna be creating a lot new impervious. So hopefully, we won't end up with, you know, dare I jinx it, you know, too much of new needed infrastructure from a water retention perspective.
it's a lot of taxpayer dollars
It's
being
a
put
lot of
underground
money.
in a hole.
Exactly.
So what we have to do is do what's necessary, make sure we're not affecting anyone downstream. And my guess is it certainly will not be as extensive as Ox Ridge, because clearly not building that size.
And that's a P and Z, that's what P and Z weighs in on that?
Weighs
Yes,
in on that, so.
yes.
But again, you might have, and that's, you're gonna have to talk to the architect and Mike about, you know, maybe pervious pavers is one way to avoid that. If you're gonna rip up all the asphalt anyways, it might be something to consider. Whether it's the right tool, I don't know.
From a sequencing perspective, P&Z doesn't sign off and you need it to be able to go over to the building
Right,
department.
we will sign on the building, when the building permits come in,
Right.
for all three of these, there's going to be 3 separate permits. We look at all building permits in town, whether it's someone's shed, deck, new house, bathroom renovation, whatever, they all go through zoning first. Our job is, does it comply with zoning? Yes or no? If it complies, we hand it over to Mike and his group. over
And you can't sign off though until environmental,
Right, all the boards
architectural
have signed
review,
off.
they're all appeals, they all have to clear first before it lands on your desk for final approval.
Right, we're hoping there's no appeals from any members.
Right. Are those groups actually governing bodies, like meaning like do they actually vote or they just recommend to your department?
The Architecture Review Board is advisory only.
Right.
Planning and Zoning and Environmental Protection Commission take actual votes.
Okay.
So what's likely to happen is you make your presentations one night, they come back a couple weeks later with everyone in favor, yes, here's the written decision. So it's usually a couple weeks, and then, Mike, here's a question we haven't discussed. Foundation only versus the whole thing.
We could do a foundation only first, and then,
Right, the advantage of a foundation-only permit, where the architect and the contractor is coming in for a permit just to build a foundation. If you think of something the size of this room or bigger, they might not have finished the final detail, last tweaking of the plan, but at least by doing a foundation-only permit, you can be out there, you can have your contractor
tweak you
moving.
up 3 months, you save you up to 3 months' time, as long as you know basically the shell, the foundation.
Because digging the foundation, sometimes that's weather sensitive.
But that's only gonna come up to the extent we're going outside the existing footprint, right? I mean, we probably would not, if we're
Right.
renovating inside the
If
existing.
you're renovating
footprint.
inside.
Renovations inside?
I'm sorry?
It's just completely renovations on all these buildings?
Well, no, there's some places
Some
that,
new.
there is some new outside of the footprint, but not extensive.
Okay.
So that would be one way, maybe save a little time.
What happens, and I don't wanna completely blow the agenda up here, but
Mhm.
what happens when the portables are removed? I mean, presumably something has to happen to the portables and something has to happen to where the portables were, right?
Well, that'll be part of the plan, and there'll be a demolition permit issued as part of the building permit.
Okay.
Which includes whatever the site remediation is gonna be.
Okay.
You know, all the portables are on blacktop.
They are, okay.
Yes, so that may become grassed area.
Yeah,
May become a blacktop playground area. So, you know, those are all the things that part of the plan that are gonna determine how much impervious surface we're adding, if any, because that's gonna be a subtraction.
right.
So,
I was gonna
you
say,
know,
can you trade off that impervious for?
well, they look
for-
at net area.
Right, okay.
You know, here's where you are now, here's where you are when you're building, here's where you are when you finish.
It's like carbon.
And that's where they come up with the ideas for your different drainage requirements.
Yeah, okay, good.
So, Mike, the idea is that the portables would be demoed on site?
Yeah, yes. Actually, the portable at homes, there's talk of,
Firehouse.
the firehouse has asked
Oh.
to use them for training buildings. They actually have the suspensions under them with the wheels and
Okay.
the, you know, the tongue for the
Yeah,
tractor
yeah,
trailer to hook
yeah.
up to. Yeah, you can separate those. Those are 4 separate boxes. You can separate those and move them. They've been in place there for 12, 13 years.
Oh, if they can be repurposed, that's great, right? That'll save the town
Yeah,
some money.
the
because
fire
commission's gonna come
department,
to us
the
anyway.
fire commission is asked, I showed one of the men from the fire marshal's office.
Sean Murphy.
Yeah, Sean Murphy, he and I looked through the buildings and, you know, I let Kate know.
Right,
Kate
yeah.
Bush know that these possibly be available. The other portables will probably just be demolished, but like I said, there's a remediation plan
Okay.
and all that comes from, the architect makes that plan.
All right.
you know?
Okay, no, that's good to know.
You know, when you're building and the portables are still up, you're going to have some drainage measures in place that won't be as stringent once the whole building's built because you're gonna tear things down and add more impervious surface.
Right.
And that's where Jeremy's office has the expertise on that.
Got it, got it. Anything else for these guys? We can let you guys go.
Whenever you need us back. just
No, this
call.
was super, you guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. This was really, really
Good
helpful.
night.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your help.
Take care. You need to see-
No, I have the old ones, but I gotta get the new ones. See what?
Quick update next on meetings with the state grant consultant candidates. Was hoping to be able to make a recommendation tonight to retain one of the consultants. At last week's meeting, it was suggested that we get another proposal, and we reached out to Colliers, spoke to Colliers, got a proposal from Colliers yesterday. We have not yet, the kind of small group of Frankie Schuster and Paul Harding and myself have not been able to coordinate a call with Colliers yet. We had a very productive call with O&G last Friday, but before we make a recommendation, I wouldn't be comfortable making it, because people wanted to have that second proposal. I want to see that through, and not just make a recommendation based on the proposal. Give Frankie and Paul and myself a chance to have a conversation with Colliers, knowing that we can't sign up a retainer letter until we have the appropriation, which is next Tuesday anyway. I think we'll just roll this to next Thursday's meeting, for the agenda for next Thursday. We should have by that point spoken to both of them, interviewed both of them, and have a solid recommendation for the grant consultant. Tuesday, Jill and I met with Dr. Adley just to, I mean, Jill knows him obviously very well from her Board of Education involvement. I've never met him, so it was an opportunity for me to meet him and talk about the project and understand some of the concerns he had and things that he was going to be focused on. He was hoping to be at tonight's meeting, but he's not feeling well. So, I mean, it was a very productive meeting. It was really preliminary. He obviously spoke very highly of the principals and their involvement, and you know, a lot of deference to what their role is going to be in this, and same with the PTO folks. You know, and he has essentially said, he'll be available and be a resource and be helpful in any way he possibly can. Anything else on that meeting that you think?
He also spoke very positively of Mr. Lynch.
Mr. Lynn, yes, he did.
I pay him a lot to do that.
So, he's on board, he's paying attention, and, we'll be involved as we go. Next thing was, talking about, that's exactly what you had mentioned, Randy, talking about milestone planning and timelines. Jill had put together, I think using the precedent that has been generated for Ox Ridge that we all have in our binders, a framework for a timeline, important milestones. I think before we dive into the everything else piece of it, it probably makes sense to just touch now on the architect RFPs. I know Frankie and Paul were part of that subcommittee, but I know Jameson, you and Jill have been looking at the RFPs. Mike, you and Kate drafted those up. You guys have given some comments and some changes. Is there anything more that the four folks on the committee need to do with respect to the RFPs before we can direct Kate to roll those out to the architectural community?
I think content-wise, the only thing that Frankie had brought up was mentioning something in the RFPs about the importance of safety structures and safety precautions.
Okay.
That may have been missing from there, to make sure that,
Yeah, that was a good point he brought
yeah.
up.
And did you guys build that in, or is that?
I haven't changed it yet, but I do have his memo about that.
Okay.
You know, I figured I'd wait till you give me everything, like, we don't have dates yet.
Right.
Dates.
You know,
Yeah.
they're asterisks where it's supposed to be a date.
Correct.
And an asterisk of who the member
To
of
whom
the
they send it
committee
to.
Yep.
is gonna receive these reports. Is it gonna be you, is it gonna be whoever's?
Probably easiest to send it to me and then I can disseminate.
Okay, just so we know to,
Yeah.
fill in all the blanks on the RFP.
Yeah, and other than that, it was small typo stuff, or not even typos, but just where Ox Ridge hadn't been swapped out for.
Yeah, I think Kate already did that, she
Yeah.
already changed that out.
But thanks for getting all that over and done.
So yeah, that wasn't something that we need to vote on. I think that that's something that we just needed to discuss. And process-wise, what should I call Kate or Joe call Kate and say we're
One
ready
of
to
you
go? Do
should,
you
and
want
I'm going to also, I'll send her an email, because I'm sure she'll be reading that.
Okay.
So, yeah, but call her.
Fill in these last little pieces to close it up so it's ready to go.
Yeah, her and I will discuss what dates work with the schedule, and then she'll get the legal notice going. And I believe she still has the list of architects that, you know, we received 11 proposals last time.
Right.
And so we have all that contact information, and I don't think there was a good firm we missed.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, it's gonna go out publicly. It's gonna be a public notice, so any architect,
I got you.
any
Yeah,
architect
and
under
we
the
also
sun can
send it.
respond,
But we will also go out actively and
solicit, right?
Yeah. And do you want to just use the same 11, or do you want us to narrow that down a little bit?
No, that same 11, they all had good,
Okay,
you know, a lot of good points to them.
okay.
The interesting, just as an aside, we ranked them lowest cost to highest cost was one of the ways we ranked them. And we ranked them by experience. The firm we ended up using at Oxford was in the middle on just about everything. They weren't the highest, they weren't the lowest, they weren't the most experienced, they weren't the least. But you know, and it shows right in the middle, and they're really good. You know, so there are a lot of really good school firms out
Right,
there
right.
that do a lot of Connecticut work.
Cool. Okay, good. So that's that piece of it. That's obviously that and the grant consultant are kind of the front load timeline items and the appropriation, which we'll talk about in a second. But Jill and David, did you guys want to talk about, I don't know what the plan was otherwise with regard to milestones and scheduling and timelines?
Why don't you take it for the funding?
Okay, well, I had sent out the memo that lays out the funding, timing, and process. It's really, you know, a three-step process. Board of Finance request. I'll put together the second memo for the quote, initial bonding resolution to get through the RTM. We'll be back to you guys next week for a vote on that, and I'll have some numbers for you to consider in that process. Randy, do you remember for Ox Ridge, I know what the number was, it was $3 million that you guys initially approved. Do you remember, was there any methodology for coming up with that $3 million?
You say what's in that $3 million?
Yeah, what's in the three, I mean, I have a verbal list of items, but I have been unable to source, like, what do we think those costs are going to be? So I can use a methodology where I say, okay, the initial request for Ox Ridge was X% of the total cost, and do something similar with the cost stated, the cost estimates that we have now, which I think is a workable approach, knowing that the initial bonding request is a small part of the much bigger one to come, you know, a month or so later. But I just didn't know.
I don't recall there being, and there may be, but like some sort of percentage. I doubt it would have been a percentage of the project, but it was more what is likely to be spent between now and full approvals and full appropriation, and add a contingency to it. That was likely the process, but I can dig in and try and find out if there's something more specific.
Do you remember who might have done that on there?
Yeah, it would have been Rusty and Kip would have been leading that.
Okay, I'll reach out to Kip,
Okay.
see if he remembers anything around that. Because I looked through the spending report, right, to see, but, you know, the spending report, I couldn't really.
Yeah. I had kind of the same question. It's like I get the first one, I get the 102,000.
Yeah.
And I get the 63 to 5 million, and I'm not quite sure what the 3 to 5 is supposed to cover.
Yeah, and timing wise, what we're gonna be, in the Ox Ridge case, they did their $3 million initial request in May and went back for the full request in June. Right, so they did them sort of back to back. I was trying to push this forward so that we get our initial bonding resolution one in April. to reduce the possibility that we actually tap the Board of Finance reserve at all, right? So that it's sort of like, we need the Board of Finance monies to be allowed to retain these people. But the goal is to get the next approval done before the first invoice arrives. So, so my goal would be to get the next dollar amount done for the RTM vote on April the 18th. And then the final one for the RTM vote in June. It would have to be June 6th is their regular meeting. I suppose we could always beg them to do a special meeting if necessary. But the grant has to be in by the 30th, so
Right.
At a bare minimum, we'd have to have the RTM vote a week before that.
Yeah, but let's shoot for the early, let's,
I'm gonna shoot,
excuse me, for planning purposes, let's be conservative.
I'm
and
shooting for the
earlier.
6th.
Yeah.
Yeah, June 6th.
Right, and we also need to fill in that 10-day period that Jen mentioned. No, for the funding?
Well, yes, in terms of expenditures.
Right,
But in
right.
terms of the
In
stamp
terms of,
approval.
in terms
Yeah.
of dispensing, yes.
Yeah.
It is theoretically possible
April.
that an invoice could arrive
Right.
and sit for
Right.
a week before it
Right. Which
actually
is- yeah.
gets
Most
checked
30 days,
for
that's
it,
fine.
yeah.
Yes, that's right. I didn't-
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as far as our committee's deadlines are well before those, so for the first larger amount is 3/17, we've gotta be ready to go by, right? Or what, that's when we're gonna make our
That's next
decision.
week, and I was
Yeah.
gonna put together that memo over the weekend. I was waiting until we got past the initial approval
Gotcha.
before I hit you guys with the second set of numbers.
Perfect.
Yep, okay.
Do we need to do anything at this meeting? I think it was the last meeting, we voted on the 102, right? Is there anything we need
I don't think we voted on it.
I don't think we voted on it, so I
Okay,
was thinking,
officially.
I was thinking we needed to get a motion, get a
That's fine.
second, and hold a vote, which is, just to make the formal request to the Board of Selectmen and the Board, and ask that they recommend it to the Board of Finance.
And you and Mike feel pretty comfortable with that, that breakdown?
Yeah, we already talked about that, and like I said, the goal is to get the second one in place, so that this is just to allow us to continue
Okay.
moving
Then do we have a motion to approve the initial request of the Board of Finance for the $102,500?
Yes.
Motion by Jameson, second. David Kerwar, all in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? None? So that one's carried.
So Jameson and then David Kerr, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
While we're voting on things, Jen Chernesky mentioned something today that I think we probably ought to take care of as well, which is, and it came up, David, you just mentioned it, which is invoices may come in, and approval of invoices, and who can sign to approve invoices and disbursements. And, that may start even, if Mike is going out and retain, we're gonna have to retain the initial consultant, the grant consultant, we're gonna have surveyors, probably gonna have to send at least a work order, as will the asbestos guys, right?
Yeah.
And so my suggestion was that any of myself, Jill McCammon, or David Martin would have signature authority on funding requests or invoices or work orders. And so I'd like, if any discussion on that, if people have any other thoughts, if we need a bigger group or that's too many people, and if we have discussion on that and can put that to a vote so we can get that
I think that
put in place.
sounds simple and fair.
No objection.
Okay. So a motion to approve Price, McCammon, and Martin as authorized signatories for the committee. David Kerwar moved. A second. Jameson Riley, second. All in favor? Any opposed? None? So that's carried. I'll let Jen know that.
Beyond that, we probably need some overall processes. Do you want to take that on too? Just, Jen sent us a memo, and we had a little bit of, I know on the cafeteria committee, we just kind of built a process so everybody understood what the steps were for signing off on invoices.
I'll have to get with her and find out exactly what she wants. I didn't drill down into that too much.
Okay.
Yeah, I will do that.
They had a pretty good process that Jennifer Tranesky and Rich Rudel came up with,
Okay.
that they've been using at Oxbridge, and it was pretty much somebody from the building committee okays the invoice, and then it goes to the town, and then first selectman interviews it, or signs it rather, then it goes to Rich Rudel, and he codes it.
Okay.
Because when we got the funding, the second set of money,
Right.
actually, the first 3 million, they made up a schedule of codes with dollar amounts, and then when they got the 60 million, they did the same thing, they just expanded it.
Okay.
So Rich Rudel figures out who gets, what code gets charged, and then it goes back to the town, and the finance department at the town cuts the check.
David, I'll forward it. I realized that when I forwarded her email to you, I had not included the enclosure, so I'll send that to you right now.
Okay, great. No worries.
That should be coming to you momentarily. Okay. That was her process note, that's what
Yeah, it
Mike was
works
just
well.
describing.
It works
So,
well.
It's already working.
I was gonna say, it's
not
working
regular.
great. Other milestone planning timeline
Well, I
items
think
to discuss?
the next thing we want to, if we're gonna follow the Oxford plan, the next thing we wanna get on is RFP for the construction manager.
Right,
So
the RFQ first,
excuse me.
right.
So, we're selecting the form of construction management, so I would say maybe in time for our next meeting, we take that on.
Mike, is that
process.
something
You
that,
have you sent us the RFP.
I
You sent us a draft
The same draft
RFQ,
as I
yeah.
did the architect, I did the RFQ and the RFP,
right?
and Kate and I already made some corrections to them.
And I think it's logical that it's the same working group. Does that,
Fine by me.
right? I think that's kind of what I
I
anticipated.
speak on behalf of Frankie and Paul. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Right, okay.
It may cost you a couple of beers.
Yeah.
That's fine. Anything else on that agenda item, or can we move to the next?
No, I think this, this needs to get to a better state, it's just kind of and maybe where Dave, I think is.
It's a framework that needs to get built out some more.
Yeah, I
Right.
think Dave is gonna take that on for
Thank
us,
you.
so, thank you.
The next item we had was to set a regular meeting schedule for the next 30 to 60 days. We had talked about doing these meetings every Thursday at this time, the 6 PM time slot every Thursday. And I think we agreed that we agreed through March. Do we want to think about extending that, or do we want to wait and see if this works through March and then set a schedule for April as well? What are your thoughts on that, Joe?
Well, I think in order to move away from the special meeting to a regular meeting, we have to have 30 days out. So whether we do it tonight or we do it next week, I think we probably want to give ourselves the flexibility of a regular meeting structure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for my benefit then, and for others on the committee for whom this is new, what is
Okay.
the benefit of a regular meeting as versus the way we've been doing it, which is frankly getting our act together between Sunday and Tuesday and
It doesn't
calling a
change the
meeting.
agenda writing.
Okay.
The only thing that it changes is that, effectively, is that if you get to a meeting and you've got to amend the agenda because something comes up, you can't amend it if it's a special meeting. So, you can kind of figure out how to work your way around it, but it just provides you more flexibility.
So it's probably a good idea if we just go ahead, if we can, agree and set it, and then if something comes up and we need to have a different meeting day or time,
call that as a
we can
special.
call a special meeting, make it an extra meeting, and in place of meeting, whatever, probably is the best way to go forward.
And then I feel like there should be some sort of informal RSVP type thing, so we know once we've got a regular thing out, so we make sure we have quorums at each meeting.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, the only time that is likely to be problematic is that week that you're away.
School
in
break.
April. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, and I'm just thinking out loud, maybe we skip the school break week,
If most people are out. yeah.
right? If people
I'll be
are
out.
either out or are hurting their children around that week, it may be easier to just skip,
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
And then if those of us who have business that we need to do in small groups or subcommittees, we can work, we can figure that out.
Okay.
And that week is, what week is?
April 11th, the week of Monday is the 11th.
So it'll be the 14th would be that
Correct.
Thursday.
So do we want to go out through the end of April then? And are we still every week through April?
I think- What was the pattern for Oxbridge?
It was weekly.
It was weekly.
Yeah, we got it in the
They went
mornings.
weekly at the beginning and then went to 2 weeks and then they went to 1 week and then they adjusted it again to hit the pay
Okay,
requisitions.
yeah,
Right now, we're doing monthly.
And then, yeah, it's monthly now.
Yeah,
okay.
once the construction gets going.
Yeah, I think we're gonna be busy again, and between now and June 30th time block, I think weekly makes sense.
And it felt necessary.
Okay.
It wasn't like we were sitting there kind of figuring out things to talk about
Okay,
at that point in time.
okay. Does this 6 PM time still work for everybody?
Yeah, and then it gets very busy when the, all the charrettes and the interviews start happening. That's when
Yeah.
it's just like a lot of ad hoc. There'll be like a month or two where it's like, oh my gosh.
When did that happen for you guys?
It was April, May.
Yeah.
Was it
It was,
like 19?
You selected in early May, it looks like, so.
So if you selected in early May, you must have gotten them in April sometime, yeah.
April,
So is it simple enough to just run through the end of May now?
Fine with
Just say
me.
Thursday,
Yeah.
every Thursday at 6
Why don't we
o'clock?
run to the end of June?
Or June?
Yeah,
Sure.
that's fine.
Yeah,
Okay,
Because we can always change those anytime we want to. so.
yeah, with the exception of the week of school break.
Yeah.
And do we figure out Zoom participation? Is it possible?
It is not.
It is not, okay.
It's-
it can be all or it can be
Oh,
all or
everyone's on
nothing,
Zoom, okay,
is what
yeah,
it can
okay.
be.
Yeah, I think that the town still uses GoToMeeting, which is cumbersome.
Yes, it requires a lot of people to administer,
Got it, got it.
which also.
So we can either do an all remote or an all in person, but
Okay.
hybrid isn't happening.
But this room will have more capabilities than will the auditorium. So we'll see if we can at some point.
Yeah, I think that becomes a fallback, right? If we have to,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out, but let's not
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's not
Let's
offer it
plan
up
on
as
in
a
person.
regular.
More productive if we're all together.
Yeah.
I'd like to note that next week's meeting is St. Patrick's Day, and
Yeah,
perhaps an
that is true.
offsite is in order, I don't know.
You're gonna be out that
To
night?
deem, or-
I don't think I'm gonna put that in the notes. so.
We'll have our appropriation by then, so we should really.
Yeah.
102,000.
Yeah, can we put a line item in the 102?
Yeah.
It might be the post-meeting, requirement.
We'll be done early enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So how would you like to word that motion to approve a regular meeting schedule every Thursday at 6, through?
Would someone like to make a motion
Yeah.
for having a regular meeting scheduled through the end of June on Thursday evenings at 6 PM?
With the exception
With the
of.
exception
exception of
of
April
April
14th.
14th.
Make that motion.
Jameson Riley makes a
Second.
motion with David Martin seconding it.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
No opposed? Then really the last business item was the school tours. And we sent around the memo from public schools and from Duke Deneen. There is the opportunity, I mean, it's really, if people would like to, for lack of a better term, piggyback on the school tours that the Board of Education is doing for its annual budgeting process. That's being done this Saturday, starting at 8 a.m., running
At
through,
Middlesex, yeah.
I'm sorry?
At Middlesex.
At Middlesex, and then going basically every half hour. So it will hit schools in addition to the schools that this committee is responsible for. You can try to time it, so I guess you just show up at our schools when they're supposed to be there. Assuming there's no delays, that should work.
We don't,
Mike is
or not that.
Mike is gonna run this like a German train, you know, so I'm sure it's gonna be right on time, but,
Sometimes ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
That's true too.
It is, yeah.
Sometimes ahead of schedule, sometimes the
Well,
crowd filters out. Sometimes it-
But
What-
people
what's
should
involved in the
understand,
tour?
people should understand that this
Right.
tour is meant to
What's
cover
involved in the
a
tour?
lot, this tour is meant to cover a lot more than what we're doing, right?
Right.
So there's gonna be a lot of other stuff shown and discussed, and it's not gonna be really focused on the school renovation project, okay?
Yeah.
And the other thing we need to be careful about is if more than 5 of us show up at the tours this Saturday, that's technically a quorum, so we shouldn't be discussing any committee business. Let's, keep the conversation around stuff other than committee business, because we can't discuss committee business in a quorum outside of a duly called and authorized meeting.
So if that's the case, is it almost counterintuitive to be going there because you can't ask relevant questions to what this committee is doing?
You can ask questions, we can't stand there and deliberate. But I would suggest that it's probably not the most efficient way to get information.
Yeah, I also
Yeah, that was
don't
sort of the
want
next point I was gonna make, is that
Yeah.
Mike graciously offered to arrange smaller, more focused tours that are, focused on specifically the areas that are gonna be renovated and things that are, relevant to this project and this
Yeah.
committee. And so, while Duke was nice enough to say we could join the big tour, to your point, it might make a lot more sense to do smaller tours with Mike. And I guess, I don't wanna overburden Mike. I mean, the question
No, it's
really
no
is,
problem,
could
I
you-
mean, it's really no problem at all, and, we could do it if, we're very flexible. If you wanna go during the day, just sign in and get a visitor's badge, and myself or my assistant Kevin will escort you through the building.
I just want to be conscious of obviously your time and commitment in it, but also if we go to the general one, we're taking time away from parents that are there to ask questions and learn about the school, and we're there to do.
Well, I guess, the question I really have is, if we were to try to make it efficient, could we set a single time to schedule tours with Mike focused on renovation-related stuff, knowing that we could well be a quorum, but we just can't deliberate. We can ask questions, we can look, but we can't deliberate.
Well, you can warn a meeting if you want to warn a meeting.
And that's how Oxford did it. Theirs was considered a meeting.
It was considered a meeting?
Yes.
We
They
just
took the
didn't,
whole,
did we have to do an agenda and the whole
Yes,
nine?
but
the agenda could be
One
the
line
tour.
item,
Okay.
tour of the schools.
Yeah.
Which is what,
Yeah, and and for the Oxford thing, some of the members of the committee wanted to see Tokenique School
Mm-hmm.
and in the middle school, they wanted to get an idea of the flavor of what the other newer buildings looked like. It had elementary,
Yeah, it might be helpful to see Oxford Ridge, at least, right?
Yeah.
so.
Would it, I'm just thinking out loud here, is it easiest for you, Mike, to give us some time slots that work, and then we'll tell you, we'll send that to the committee, and, it's gonna be one of those, whatever time slot works for the most people is the time we'll do it?
I normally work from, say, 6:30 to 5:30, and except for a 9 o'clock Monday morning meeting with Dr. Adley, my schedule is very flexible. So, I can fit people in, 1, 2, 3, I think I can take up to 4, there's 9 on the committee.
You
So,
can
I
pick up
could,
to
it
4 at a
doesn't
time.
matter to me, I'm walking in the buildings all the time anyway. I like to talk, it's an Irish birth defect, so,
I'm sorry,
you want to go around, it's
I'm sorry,
fine.
just before you, are you maxed at 4 people at a time? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
because you
saying?
don't want to quorum.
without a
Or
warning.
without calling a
We could
meeting?
warn a meeting if
Yeah.
everyone is available at a specific time and set that as a meeting. We can,
Yeah, but, so I'm very flexible to take people around.
So I was gonna say, maybe Chris, if you proposed us sometimes, start with you as the leading time.
Right.
If there's
Yeah.
availability for as many people as possible, we pick that time.
Yeah,
Who
Do
can
you
go,
want
can
to
go.
try one for next Thursday before our meeting?
could do that.
Mm.
It's not pretty, what do you think it would take, an hour and a half? Do 3 schools?
Yeah, so it'll probably take about 30 minutes each school, so if we,
Gotta get from one to the other.
they got the
Well,
different times they get out too.
Well, next Thursday is parent conferences.
So that's probably not a good
So-
Thursday.
Well, evening conferences, which I think are a mix of in-person and Zoom, it's hard to know how many people will still be there.
You're right.
So that 6:30 in the morning time slot sounds good. Who's on for that?
I'll do the morning, I don't care, I'm here.
Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. We have kids there.
You know, and-
Day starts at
and
5
honestly, if
a.m.
it's
Yeah.
evenings, Monday nights are just not good for
Got
me.
it.
But any other evening, it's fine.
Well, so part of consideration maybe is when kids are there and not, is it better to not be in their way, or?
Well,
So
It's
it
better
says-
when there's not.
it's
Yeah.
better when they're not there, but if it's only like 2 people and not 5 or 8, it's fine. You know, I mean, there's plenty of times where there's, you know, a school employee with 1 or 2 parents walking down the hallway or something, it's,
Yeah.
you know.
But so the parent, the teacher conferences here, those
Yeah.
are next Thursday, are they in the evening?
So they're Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The Thursday is the only evening set of conferences, which are 6 to 8. So there will definitely be some teachers and some parents there. I don't know that it'll be the
Would
whole
it be
school full.
would it be disruptive? I think Jill's idea is a good one, because people kind of have Thursday afternoon blocked out anyway.
I don't think, because conferences don't start till 6. So I think that would be a time when, there might be some staff members around, but
It's like if
no
we tried
parents
to do
yet.
4 o'clock or 4:30,
4 to 6.
4 to 6 next Thursday.
Because if we want to go to Oxbridge potentially to see some of the newer stuff, it gives us a 2-hour window.
Why don't I propose that, before we, let's think about that, I'll propose that to the group. Mike, can you kind of keep that on your radar?
Yeah.
Because I think I'm not sure what we'd get out of Oxford right now,
Okay.
in that a lot of what we're doing here is new libraries, and that's
Mm.
phase 2. That's the academic, I forget what it's called, the congregation wing or something.
The assembly room.
Assembly room. And then they're just basically still putting up drywall
Oh, okay.
in the first phase, so
Gotcha.
it's kind of hard to
Okay.
envision classroom sizes.
But if we give ourselves a 2-hour window
Yeah.
potentially to do the 3 schools, to get between them and stuff, and not have to rush through it,
All
then.
right, why don't I send a note out to the whole committee and
Sure.
suggest that, but keep that on your radar as a slot,
Okay.
all right? In terms of agenda review, are there items that people specifically want to roll into next week's agenda? I know we talked specifically about the grant consultants and,
Grant consultants, I'll have another memo out to you guys this weekend with a rationale for the second dollar amount
Mhm.
request.
just making a note. And then, maybe even by then, we can be discussing the construction manager RFQ.
Yeah, that'd be great to get that moving.
That's all I had on the agenda for business. I know we had public comment as number 2, but since we've spent an hour and 15 minutes, is there any public comment on what we talked about today? Okay. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn for tonight? David Martin moved, second. Jill McCammon, all in favor of adjourning? No opposed? Thank you, everybody.